If someone's offering you a single solution to a nutrition or a gut problem, it's probably rubbish. The science of nutrition is one of the most complex sciences we have. We were told it was the simplest, all calories and macronutrients. Turns out it's really complicated. That means there isn't one single product or solution to it. There isn't one vitamin that's going to cure you. My name's Tim Spector. I'm an MD. I'm a Professor of Epidemiology at King's College in London, and I'm also co-founder of the nutrition and gut health company Zoe.
Why the internet gets dieting all wrong.
I think it's very hard at the moment for the average public who's not a scientist, not a doctor, to know what to do for their health. Reports, one day that coffee is bad for you, another day coffee is good for you. Eggs are good for you one day and eggs are bad for you. Public has to realize that the media thrive on these stories, on these scare stories, and they love food stories. So, our newspapers and social media are full of all this stuff. So the key is to not overreact and to realize that your core diet is the most essential, and that if you are looking after your gut microbes, it doesn't really matter what else you do or don't do, because the majority of your plate every day is going to be full of good stuff. Whether you have eggs, whether you have coffee, whether it's good or bad, is not going to be crucial to your health. What is crucial is that majority of the time you're doing the right thing. 80% rule is what I love, is 80% of the time you're doing things right. And you don't worry about the odd time, you may have the odd trip to McDonald's once a month. If your gut health is good, it will cope with the rest. All good scientists should change their minds when the data changes. And I've made lots of mistakes in my career, most of it not necessarily my fault. There was some data on margarine being healthier than butter. So I changed our fridge back, this is 20 years ago, to having these low-fat spreads and kicked out the butter. My wife objected. She's French-speaking, so she wouldn't have any of it. She kept the butter, so we had separate compartments. And I realized that I got it wrong, and now there's no low-fat, artificial, ultra-processed spreads in my fridge. So I'm constantly changing my view on many of these things. I'm much more open-minded than I think I was before. So it's an exciting time to be a scientist. I think what is important to realize is that science is moving on at a pace. It takes, on average, 20 years for doctors to change their practice from the time that a new scientific discovery has been proven. So there's a big lag between what the latest science is delivering and what the latest practice is, or what your insurance is going to pay for, et cetera, et cetera. The public is stuck in the middle here, and I think what's important is to see when there's a consensus, when there have been a number of studies that are all pointing in the same direction, and they've got someone they trust that is telling them, yes, the summary of this data convincingly is saying you need to do this. I think the lesson here is that the public needs to up their game a bit, to be a bit more educated, to know that I can create any outcome I want in a test tube. You need to disregard that. I can do the same thing in mice. That'll probably be pretty irrelevant. Getting people to think, has this been tested in humans? Was there a placebo arm? Is this really going to change the practice of most people, without just jumping on every bandwagon that people want you to jump on? At the same time, realize that the guidelines that are out there from government, et cetera, are very behind the times, and realize that a lot of the stuff people might be seeing on social media is probably too far ahead of the time, just so someone can talk about a test tube study or a mouse study that sounds exciting or wacky or accounts for some weird theory. There's lots of people on to looking at paleo diets or keto diets, people who only eat meat, or people who only have really high levels of fat, above 70%, that claim miraculous benefits from it. Most of these diets work short term, because if it's away from ultra-processed foods, then generally it's going to be healthy to that extent. And so people who go on a carnivore diet, which is an idea of what our ancestors ate, a very selected idea of what our ancestors ate, they'll feel benefits for a few weeks, usually lose weight. Those people will then tell everyone about it. Isn't it amazing? People go on very strict gluten-free diets, keto diets, carnivore diets, seed oil-free diets, like the idea of excluding things so that suddenly you're belonging to this club of people that are excluders. And that's perhaps the attraction, and that's why most religions have some food-based ideas that keeps that community together. So they become a little group, they feel better for the first 6 weeks, and that's when the problems start. So they may be very hard to sustain, like a keto diet is really hard to sustain those high levels of fat. Most people feel rather sick. And long-term, your gut is suffering. Any restriction to the amount of plants that are going into your gut will start to have an effect of killing off the good ones and making the overgrowth of the bad ones that are just eating the scraps of what you're eating. And so long-term, you have immune problems and gut health problems, mental problems down the line. So I think exclusion diets will work short-term, and people might want to do that as an experiment to see how they feel. But then they've got to long-term start looking after their long-term gut health, which is the thing that's going to keep them alive and keep them free of diseases. What I like about our message is that it's not about exclusion. It's about inclusion. At the very best level, all that mattered was you're getting that big variety of those 30-plus plants. I get a lot of questions about organic food, for example. Should we only be eating organic food? How bad are these pesticides and these herbicides for us? These are great questions that don't have simple answers. It's always better, I think, to eat non-organic vegetables than not to eat them at all. Yes, fruits and vegetables are sprayed with pesticides and herbicides that are probably slightly negative for our health, particularly if you're pregnant or you're a young child or you have some immune problems or you're sick. For most of us, it's a low-level harm. You want to avoid it, but it's not life and death. And that's the way I see about these things. We should also be trying supporting farming that's moving towards organic, because we'd all prefer to live in a world that didn't have these chemicals sprayed to kill all kinds of life. And we do know that these pesticides harm our gut microbes. So they've been shown to be relatively safe for our genes. They don't alter our genes, but they do interfere with the genes of our microbes. So in theory, I don't want to eat pesticides at all. The reality is it's tough. I don't like paying twice as much for my food. At home, what I do is I get organic food delivered on a basis, but when I'm out and about, I'm not that worried about it, because it's better to eat vegetables that have some chemicals on them, wash them off, than not to eat them and deprive your gut microbes of a meal. Now, some foods I would worry more about than others, because they're not all the same. If you look at oats have a terrible record because they're sprayed multiple times before harvesting, so they can have many times the levels of other crops. So I'd always go for organic oats, and you can find those in stores now. It's worth paying a little bit more for those. Similarly with berries, if you can get organic strawberries that aren't sprayed, they'll be much healthier. But if you're talking about things like oranges or avocados, I'm less worried, because you're not eating the skin. And a lot of the pesticide is in that skin. So it's a slightly nuanced question, but personally, I'm not obsessed so that I get stressed every time I go out to a store or a restaurant about not finding the exact product I want. It's about not exposing yourself to things over long periods of time, not the occasional event. That's really important. Another thing people ask me about is mercury content of large fish. If I'm a fish fanatic and I'm having fish 2 or 3 times a week, I wouldn't want to having those same large fish, because I would be building up high mercury levels. you might want to have your fish checked, and there are places you can buy fish from that have guaranteed low mercury levels. But I'd be going for smaller fish, which are also more sustainable for the oceans. My own personal choices of food are, I'm thinking about the health consequences of the food, some ethical considerations about it, but also the effect on the planet. Fish is particularly pertinent to that because most of the fish we get is grown in fish farms, some which are good, some which are bad. So it's good to be thoughtful, but in general, go for small fish that are more likely to be sustainable and also have very high levels of the omega-3s that are really good for your brain. I'm often going to people in restaurants and they're very worried about the salt content and they're asking for no salt to be added to their food. This is a subject that I was interested in because I had high blood pressure diagnosed, came on suddenly about 15 years ago, and I tried salt restricting for a couple of weeks and see if it would change my blood pressure. I didn't notice the difference. So I started researching this, and it turns out that for the average normal 50-year-old, cutting out salt virtually completely from your diet improves your blood pressure by about 1 to 2%. If you have a problem with hypertension, blood pressure, it might increase to about 4%. And when I looked in detail, it turns out that there's only about 1 in 5 people that are really sensitive to salt. 4 out of 5 of us are not that sensitive. So it has an exaggerated effect that most people aren't aware of. So I tell people that if you're worried about salt, do a proper test, take your blood pressure 3 times a day for 2 weeks, having no salt at all, which is horrible, and see what effect it has on your blood pressure. What I also found out is that eating just something like beetroot can reduce your blood pressure 3 times more than salt restriction. Similarly, just changing your salt to a potassium salt can have 3 times the effect of salt restriction. So most people don't have to worry nearly as much as they are. And I think it destroys a lot of the pleasure of eating and stops them maybe enjoying vegetables as much or fermented foods as much because they're worried about the salt content. That's why it doesn't come into my guidelines. And if you're avoiding most of the ultra-processed food, you're going to be avoiding the salt. There's really good data showing the salt you add at your table is negligible effect on your health compared to all the rubbish you're getting consuming too much ultra-processed food. When I was researching fermentation, I looked at kimchi eaters, and then anyone who's had kimchi knows it really tastes really salty. And when you make fermented foods, you have to add a lot of salt. They looked at over 10,000 kimchi eaters in South Korea, compare them to non-kimchi eaters of the same age, and they actually had lower blood pressure than the non-kimchi eaters. So the benefits of having fermented foods and plants contain potassium, outweighs any effect of the salt. That's a great example of a nice simple solution being exaggerated because of rather outdated research that stayed in our minds. Yes, salt has a role. Most of it's an ultra-processed food. Eating plants will have a much better effect on your blood pressure than worrying too much about salt. A lot of people also think that diet isn't that important if you've got a rich supply of supplements. And there's a lot of marketing directed at people like that to say, you don't have to worry about your diet. You just got this green powder you take every morning with 80 different chemicals and vitamins. That's all you ever need. Again, that falls into this idea of reductionism, a nice simple solution to a complex problem that usually by definition is wrong. And all the studies suggest that eating the food is always better than eating the chemical that has been derived from that food, because there are other things in the food that aren't represented in that highly purified chemical that's often made artificially by yeast in factories. Most of them are in China, with all kinds of additives, etc., that make it very different to just having that from a natural plant. The example I like is for years I was giving calcium replacement tablets to my patients in rheumatology, thinking I was helping their bones. And they'd be taking, maybe a gram a day. It turns out that taking something like that, your body doesn't deal with it. And it's now been associated over 6 studies showing that it's associated with increased risk of heart disease and atherosclerosis with a hardening of the arteries. So the calcium is being deposited in places that you don't necessarily want it because it's given in a form that the body's not used to. We normally break down calcium in tiny amounts from all the foods we're eating or from mineral waters and things like this, and it gradually gets incorporated into our body. So taking one big dose of it can have very different effects on our body. So that's why I'm always wary about supplements. They can also interact with each other, so they don't work. If you have zinc and you have iron at the same time, they stop each other working, and you don't know the quality of them at all. And things like vitamin D is called the sunshine vitamin. The body converts sunshine into vitamin D, and that's how we get most of it in our bodies, and that's how we've evolved. But taking vitamin D is not a replacement for sunshine, for example, because there's many other things in sunshine that we still don't know about that provide our bodies with a lot of benefits. And there's a lot of epidemiology comparing people who go in the sun and out of the sun, showing that even after having a melanoma, for example, people who go in the sun have a better immune system and a better outcome than people who are maybe just taking vitamin D tablets. So often we mistake a subset of a food for being better than the whole food or the whole environment like sun. And there are many other examples like that where, we just take one thing from a carrot and call it carotene and say that's going to be good. We know carrots are good for you, but if you have too much carotene, it's probably bad for you. We love to reduce foods to one thing. We can manufacture that in huge quantities. Marketing does the rest. And what seemed like a good idea is often really a pretty poor one and can often be harmful for you. If someone's offering you a single solution to a nutrition or a gut problem, it's probably rubbish. They're probably just trying to sell you something. We all, as humans, are suckers for the simple solution. The science of nutrition, as I've got into it really without biases 15 years ago, is one of the most complex sciences we have. We were told it was the simplest, all calories and macronutrients. Turns out it's really complicated. That means there isn't one single product or solution to it. There isn't one vitamin that's going to cure you. We need to take a more holistic view of it, and that's a really important message. We need to be doing things that aren't just for a 6-week diet, aren't just to lose weight. It's how do you change all your habits that you've accumulated, all these bad habits, how do you change them in this direction going forward? And do this for years so that your body is much healthier, your brain is much healthier. We make hundreds of food choices every day. And the food choices we make are the most important choices we can make for our health. So make them wisely.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community where you get access to videos early, ad-free.